All right, welcome back to United American Football Podcast. My name is Kwame. I'm here with Kwame. Please just look at the inscription in front of our shirt. It says what? Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. It's very, very important. If you've not subscribed to the channel yet, remember to like the videos, share with your friends. We are here to talk about something very interesting. So we are recording this morning. Hopefully you get it this afternoon. What has happened is that Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the owner of Manchester, or the part owner, or the majority individual owner of the club, has sat down with a lot of media men, from the Times to Barry Neville to the BBC, to discuss a wide range of issues that has come up since he took over as the majority owner, individual owner of the club, where they have been entrusted with the responsibility of building the club, turning the fortunes of the club around. And so you remember a lot of protests happened on Sunday. I think it's been imperative that someone comes out to speak to the fans, and that's exactly what Sir Jim Ratcliffe sought to do by explaining everything that has happened over the last couple of months since they took charge as seniors. People are equating them the Glazers, and it's something that he's trying very hard not to be like. He's becoming a manager or an owner who is trying to communicate a lot more with the fans and with the general stakeholders of the club to make people understand exactly what they are doing and what decisions that they are trying to do. I'm here with Kwame. We'll try and pick some quotes from the discussion that happened between Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the media men that he sat down with. It was wide range. He spoke about issues of recruitment. He spoke about issues of the club's management and finances. He talked about the Glazers. He talked about his own relationship with the Glazers. He spoke about the coach, Ruben Amorim, some decisions that they've made wrongly, and most importantly, the stadium. We'll be talking about that here on United and Everything Football. Let me make a quick turnaround. When I come back, I'll get to Kwame, and then we'll break down. We'll take some of these issues and then try and analyze the situation around them. Here on United, Everything Football. Remember, subscribe to the channel. Very, very important. We'll see you after this. All right, thank you very much, and welcome back to United and Everything Football. Kwame, great to United and Everything Football. Kwame, welcome, Charlie. I'm in the mood. I'm in the mood.
I can see that you are charged. You're charged.
You're charged. Speaking and all of that. Yes. Kwame, how are you doing?
I'm glad to be here. As always. It's always a pleasure doing this with you, to be honest. It's always a pleasure doing this with you.
Always. We couldn't have chosen a better player than ourselves. Just the two of us. Exactly. So let's get straight into action. Tell me what I'm looking at the quotes. I mean, I have some of the quotes here.
There are lots of them, so I'm wondering which ones you're going to pick.
Now let's start from the beginning, where he was asked about how that one. I can't find the quote. There wasn't a quote to it. Where he was asked where United are at the moment. Is that what they really expected? And this is the response he gave. He said that, I'm paraphrasing, that he knew it wasn't going to be like this. In fact, we are exactly where he expected us to be. So he wasn't surprised at all. I mean, what do you make of this first statement that he made when he was asked about exactly where we find ourselves?
Before I even answer the question, I don't want anybody to interpret our podcast today as backing Ineos or backing the Glazers. Fans should be open to what we are going to discuss and try to interpret. Because there are a lot of people who have entrenched positions when it comes to how they view our ownership, be it the part ownership or be it the ownership with the Glazers. None of us is happy with how the club has been run over the past 2 decades, and we would all be in favor of change. What I will say is, I am glad that for once we have an owner who is hands-on, a part owner who has been put in charge of trying to change the fortunes of the club, both on and off the pitch, despite the fact that we have majority owners. I bring this in because the Glazers for 2 decades, could not communicate with us. In fact, when they tried communicating with us, they said a lot of things that were completely wrong. You could tell they have no clue about football, absolutely no clue. So they decided to even stop talking about it at all, which I think has been one of the problems at the football club: the lack of communication, the lack of clarity, the lack of explanations. But it's a hands-on owner who has decided to face the music, because the music has been loud over the weekend. We came to sit here and we discussed the huge protest that had over 5,000 people march through the streets of Manchester to Old Trafford before the Arsenal game, organized by the 1958 group. That was the 18th protest that we have had. But instead of shying away from the situation like we've always been exposed to over the past 20 years, this man was there at the stadium. He's Manchester born. He was there at the stadium. He saw the protest before the game because he drove in. He saw the protest in the stands. He also saw a team on a football pitch that was still trying to perform despite all the chaos that has been going on. Let me say something. Before the game, I put a tweet on Twitter and I said it's going to be a long emo day at Manchester United. Rival fans misinterpreted what I was saying to mean, oh, it's about the game and we are going to struggle against Arsenal. But true Manchester United fans understood what I was referring to, because that day was going to be very, very long before the game, during the game, and after the game. Protests are not an easy thing. And he said it during the interview that he seems to be in the bad books of the media, the fans, everything. But he also said that
it's not easy picking the newspaper in the morning, and it's not easy going back home to his home in Manchester. It's not easy for him at all.
It's not. It's tough times, but he's facing it. It's brave of him to come out to face different media people to discuss it, including his own Gary Neville, who was very, 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 very tough on him. Extremely tough. In fact, Gary Neville was pushing him to places that ideally he wouldn't want to go, but he managed to circumvent it. But let's get back to your question. Your question again.
So the question was that he said United were exactly where he had hoped them to be. Not that he had hoped that he would have found them so that he could do his work. I mean, they were not so.
It's been a chaotic change. Over 1.5 years, we've been coming to this podcast. Fortunately, we started this pod at the right time. We've come here where we've discussed how chaotic things have been, with how the Glazers had put forth their proposal, asking for investments into the club rather than being forthright and direct as to what their intentions were. Inviting people to come and buy the club or come and put their money in. You couldn't really tell what they wanted. But at the end of the day, we figured out after over a year what their actual intentions were. They just needed somebody to come and relieve them of the financial mess that they've put the club into. So it was chaos from Erik ten Hag's time transitioned into this season, right? But Ineos themselves will also admit that after taking over, they have made mistakes themselves, which has contributed to the chaos, i.e., keeping Ten Hag, bringing in Ashworth, and then literally sacking him in 2 business working days.
On that note, let me bring in this quote where he says that when he was asked about Erik ten Hag and whether it was a mistake, and he said yes, it was a mistake, there were a lot of debate about it at the time. It wasn't just the cup final, but there was an emotional reaction. The fans were clearly in favor of keeping him, but yes, it was a mistake. There was a point where he had to raise his hand that yes, it was a mistake. Yeah, Kwame, continue.
And he said sorry. He actually apologized for it. He said he's very, very sorry for it in the BBC interview. Sicho is one of the people who comes on the pod and actually says the exact same thing that Sir Jim Ratcliffe said, that it was an emotional decision at the time. It shouldn't have just been off the back of a trophy and the fans' reaction to it, but rather been a well-calculated decision that should have been enforced at the time. Because if we do remember at the time, Ineos were looking to change him, but for the fans' uproar and then the fact that we were coming off a very, very, very huge FA Cup win, they had to sit down and then review the decision again, despite the fact that there was one man they had employed who was categorically clear, that is Wilcox, that Erik ten Hag was not the man. So it's no surprise that he's the one who is now taking charge of Ashworth's role, because if we understand what he was saying that the chemistry between himself Ashworth, and then the rest wasn't working. But after eliminating Ashworth, fixing the mistake, Wilcox, who had made the right assessment of Erik ten Hag, the right assessment of the squad, and comes to the conclusion that he wasn't the man to take the club forward, is the one who has been given control, together with Berada, two ex-City people, to try and steady the ship once more. Are we where we are supposed to be? 100%. He described Erik ten Hag's squad that is available to him right now as to in comparison to the wage bill, which was a very, very interesting analysis because I'd never ever sat down to think about it that way. There are players who are either injured or not available to him because we have loaned them out, right? We loan them out without replacing them. That already puts the manager in a very, very compromised position in terms of
So
the quality of the squad.
wait for me a second. I want to read a quote so you tie it in because I was coming in that order. We're going to talk about recruitment and players, but let's talk about. So I want you to tie the recruitment and the players together. Players not being good enough. So let me read this quote as we project it, and then you come in with your analysis. Then from there we will move on to Ruben Amorim and what he said, and then all the other matters will. So that's what he said about some of the players that we've recruited over time and what they have inherited as anyway. He said that if you look at the players we are buying this summer, he's referring to players that we are continuing to pay for. Those who don't understand this quote, players that we continue to pay for. That we didn't buy. We are buying Anthony. We are buying Casemiro. We are buying Onana. We are buying Højlund. We are buying Sancho. These are things from the past. Whether we like it or not, we've inherited those things and have to sort that out. For Sancho, who now plays for Chelsea, and we are paying half of his wages, we are paying 17 million to buy him in the summer. Then he goes on to say, some of the players are not good enough, and some probably are overpaid. But for us to mold the squad for us to mold that squad, we are fully responsible for, accountable for, will take time. There are some great players in the squad, as we know. The captain is a fabulous footballer. Definitely. We definitely need Bruno Fernandes. He is a fantastic footballer. So, Kwame, let's tie this into your analysis and then let's move on.
Yeah. So based on what he said, I looked at the wage bill. I intentionally went to look at the wage bill so that I would completely be in tune with how he's analyzing the squad that is available to the coach. We let players go without replacing them. That's already a handicap in terms of loaning all these quality players, high-end players, high-earning players. And then there are also high-earning players who are supposed to be available, but unfortunately are injury-prone, i.e. Mason Mount and somebody like Luke Shaw. So I looked at the squad from top to bottom in terms of hierarchy, in terms of the pay structure. There was Casemiro, who is the highest earning player at the club, who we have tried since last summer to get rid of, but then he's still available. Let's say he's available to the manager. Marcus Rashford is off. Then it comes to Bruno Fernandes, the third. Then you have the likes of Mason Mount, who earns 250k unavailable because he's been loaned out. Sancho, who earns around 250k, also unavailable because he's been loaned out. You have the likes of Luke Shaw, who earn around 190k to 200k, not available. It was reported that Anthony was also a high-end earner, despite the fact that we come to learn that that may not have necessarily been the case, but he is also up there in terms of the wage bill, the wage structure. He's also not available. It's just, if you have these players, assuming these players were applying themselves properly or had fit into the Manchester United shirt and were available to Ruben Amorim now, you're talking about a lot of quality players, especially in forward areas, who would have contributed massively to this football club, but are not available to the manager. You get what I'm trying to say? They are not there. It speaks to, and he compared the squad in that particular state to any mid-table squad that you have in the Premier League. Because if you hypothetically remove these players off the wage bill, assuming they are not there, this wage bill is very similar to the wage bill of any mid-table team, i.e. Crystal Palace or any other team. It's that weak.
So it's just a reflection of where we find ourselves at the moment.
Exactly. So that is the squad that is available to him. And he made reference to the fact that, did you see our bench against the Arsenal? We had only Kits on our bench. for a big Premier League game. And this is the squad that's available to the coach. So he feels the coach is making do the best with what he can, what he has available to him. He also made mention of the fact that I'm sure we can get into the Amorim bets.
Yes, let me quickly get that quote where he said that he feels the coach is doing a very good job, given the explanation you've given right now from the quotes that we get. He says that he's a young coach. You have to give this young guy a chance to develop and adapt to the environment. You have to give him a little bit of a break. Give him a hard time, and I have no problem with that. But Ruben Amorim is a little bit give Ruben a little bit of a break. I think he's a good guy. He works hard, and I think he is doing a good job. And that was in context to the issue about a lot of players not being available, and as a result, making things very difficult for him. He goes on to say, if I actually look at the squad which is available to Ruben, I think he's doing a really good job, to be very honest. I think Ruben is an outstanding young manager. He's an excellent manager, and I think he will be here he will be there for a long time. You are beginning to see
Fingers
a
crossed.
glimpse. You are beginning to see a glimpse of what Ruben can produce. I think you saw a glimpse of it against Arsenal. How many players against Arsenal do you see on the bench that you can recognize? How many have ever worn a Manchester United shirt for the first time as there is no squad left? We're down to the last 10 or 11 men in a squad really of proper first team players. Ruben is doing a great job. So, two things I pick out from that: we should give him time, that he believes that he's a good coach, that he's believed that he'll be here for a very long time. Let me add, when he was asked by Gary Neville who selected Ruben, he said, Omar, Jason, and myself. And it talks about the chemistry analysis that he was trying to make. That signing Ericsson or maintaining Erik ten Hag and signing Dan Ashworth wasn't good for the chemistry, because he said that was all he said about Dan Ashworth. He said that the chemistry wasn't there, and he was prepared to let it go rather than stay with it, because they could have lived with it. Like say, he doesn't have time. So let's let it go and then let's continue. Akwame, that's what he said about Ruben Amorim. Let's hear you.
Just before I get to the Ruben Amorim bets, let me just conclude on the squad. Manchester United owes £300 million in transfer fees to other clubs. This summer, I think we are supposed to pay almost £200 million out.
He said 81 million. 81.
81. Oh, he was very specific about the number.
Specific.
Oh, then thank God. Thank God it's that low. So that's where he made reference to the likes of Højlund, Anthony, Casemiro, and the likes. This is what I want to say to it. If you were not an in-year signing, I'm speaking of any player who was not an in-year signing, you should be very, very, very wary, because he said something telling about Joshua Zexi in the Arsenal game. That coming from Italy, he lost a lot of balls in the first half, as we came to see in the last episode. But it would take him time for him to get used to the league. This is my interpretation. Whoever in-years have signed, they would want to justify the signing of the players. But if you are not an in-year signing,
you are in trouble.
And they need to cut costs.
You will do it.
Because you are costing us money and we need to pay you your transfer fee off. They'll do it.
Remember, Zexi is on a very low wage compared to a lot of the other.
Almost all their signings had to take low wages to come to Manchester United. So if you're on high wages and we still owe for you, we'll sell you to use the money we get to pay off the debt and just move on.
Even Mason Mount was not spared when he was talking about those issues.
That was a huge signal to me that the purge is going to be mostly about players who have been there before, things that had happened before that they were not in control of. They'll try and rectify those things. In fact, that's what they've been trying to do all this while. So that if we clear that debt, the road will be clear for us to now bring in players. Basically, he's saying we have to sell some of these players to get rid of the debt that we owe. Then we are clear. We'll have a transfer budget for Ruben Amorim going forward. And that transfer budget can even be supplemented by how much money we can continue to make from some of the sales. He did not review the budget, but he says they will back their manager. So in speaking to them backing the manager, we shouldn't be surprised. They now have their man, right? A lot of us were arguing last summer as to whether to continue with Erik Ten Hag or not. When new people come in, very often they want to have their own people, right? To be in the house, to be able to do things anew. And that is what we should have gone with. If they have gone with this manager in the middle of a season, Ruben Amorim, a compromised situation that he finds himself, the least the club can do is to back him. And I like one thing that he said about that, saying that he would rather have all the backlash from the newspapers, all the negativity coming at him than coming at this young, up and coming, bright manager. He wouldn't want to ruin another manager's career at Manchester United. Manchester United, as we have come to sit here and see, has been a graveyard for not just managers, but a lot of players. A lot of players. I'm not one to always scapegoat the players and make it look like it's always the players' fault. It's not. A lot of very, very good players have come to this football club. Players with potential, some being world-class players, and found the situation at the football club a place not to thrive. It's rather sets them backwards. I'd say to people, if Bruno Fernandes now was in a better team, he'll be having bigger accolades and more respect than he actually gets. And he's not the only example I've set over the past decade. It's because we've not been building good teams. He's in a struggling Manchester United team. And he even gets disrespected by being compared to a lowly footballer like Martin Odegaard for absolutely no reason. When Bruno Fernandes is supposed to be compared to the very, very best midfielders in the world, they're talking to me about Odegaard. Like, I mean, how? But that's the situation. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Ruben Amorim. The reason why I'm not full on, oh, he's going to be here long term is this man, Ratcliffe, has a history of if you're not performing, and he says that Ineos, we can give you one chance. But if that one chance you don't perform, you're not going to get a second chance. And he's proved that already by getting rid of certain people at the hierarchy of the football club. Even Ashworth's sacking is a sign. Ruben Amorim is going to get a pass for this season because of everything that has been happening, the chaos that has been happening before him during his time, how the squad has been thinned out and everything. But if he doesn't kick off to a good start, I wouldn't be surprised if Ineos decide to cut ties with him because his contract is very, very short. Ideally, you would want him to be that long-term investment when it comes to the manager. That's how come they signed him when he was 39 years old. Assuming that if we do steady the ship in 3 to 5 years' time, he will still be young, motivated enough to continue to manage Manchester United into his 50s, into his 60s, thereabouts. So that is the long-term plan. They have a long-term plan. That's how come they didn't hire an old man. They hired a young man so that he can be with them for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
I wish Ruben Amorim the best because change is not easy. But he may be lucky to be the manager who actually comes to enjoy the biggest change at the football club post Sir Alex Ferguson. Because the changes are aimed at something. There was a target, right? He mentioned the targets being in 3 to 5 years' time, Manchester United will not just be financially sustainable, profitable. We would be able to win trophies again, of which we have a very, very huge target for our anniversary. We're supposed to win the Premier League by 2028. And in 5 years' time, we should have built a stadium that would put us way
World-class stadium
beyond our peers. We've seen what the new Bernabeu is doing financially for Real Madrid, right? That's exactly where he wants Manchester United to be. But he made something very, very interesting in terms of how the stadium is going to be funded. You know, it's a regeneration project of the whole of Manchester. As there have been so many regeneration projects.
I wanted us to put it at the end. But if you want to talk about it, just
let me talk about it now so that it doesn't skip me.
But insert the announcement that today there will be an announcement of the plans to build a new stadium, 100-seater stadium.
100K stadium. That would be probably the biggest stadium in the world, if I'm not mistaken. For a big club to be able to build such a humongous stadium would be amazing. But fans' interest should be in how this stadium is going to be financed. It's very important because this club is already in debt. But he said the club will build a stadium on their own. The government will take care of the regeneration projects around the entire area, but the stadium will be the heart of the project. You always need something as a soul, a heart and soul of the project to be able to do a very, very productive regeneration project. It comes to down to, so how is this stadium going to be financed? That's where the talk of equity comes in. If everybody goes into business, they will know this. I feel it is the pathway to us moving away from the Glazers, but fans are not patient enough to be able to realize such things. Whatever this man and his company Ineos puts into the club, it is not going to be free money. When they decide to finance the stadium, it will be converted into equity, meaning that one of the Glazers, or probably all the Glazers, would have to offer their shares for sale at a point in time, because the money that is being used to finance the stadium, 2 billion pounds, is not going to come from the Glazers.
Yeah.
It's probably going to come from Ineos. It wouldn't be in the form of debt, it wouldn't be in the form of loans, but it has to be converted some way, somehow, meaning that it will increase Sir Jim Ratcliffe's stake at the football club over a period of time. In the next 5 years, my expectation or my suspicion is that there will be a change of ownership
Okay.
from the Glazers to Ineos based off the investments in the football club. As we already know, he put in $300 million into the club,
So the money
and
is finished.
that $300 million was converted to increase his stake at the football club
Exactly.
from 25% to almost 29%. So imagine what that $200 million, 200 million pounds did, right? If he's to invest £2 billion, it's almost inevitable that if it is converted some way, somehow, he is going to be the outright majority shareholder at this football club and ultimately owners. That is how come he did not want to stir the beef that Gary Neville was driving at. Gary Neville was, see, a lot of people don't like Gary Neville, but when it comes to the issues of the Glazers, he's very, very passionate about it, because the Glazers tried to even do him in when he tried to build hotel football close to Old Trafford, right? The Glazers went to war with him, saying that he doesn't have the right to build that hotel very close to it. He's been banging on about how bad Old Trafford has deteriorated over a period of time, how Carrington has deteriorated over a period of time, how the Glazers have let this club rot. He hates the Glazers. He doesn't like them. I'll
Yeah.
not even put it in the mildest form. So when it got to that part where he wanted Sir Jim Ratcliffe to have a word as to how badly the Glazers have run the club down, and he has to take the brunt for it, come and sit there and take the shots that the Glazers are supposed to take instead of them. What does he have to say for it? I understood how sensible the old man was, because if you own just a small part of something and you have plans to own the whole thing, you don't come and sit down and criticize the very same people that you want to buy the club from. It
Exactly.
doesn't make sense. You don't have to be emotional about that. The reason I say this is Usmanov and Kronkis had a very similar
Mm.
situation a few years
That's
ago.
now.
Usmanov was a very, very minority shareholder. Kroenke was the majority shareholder, and Usmanov was always having a go at
Mm.
Kroenke,
Mm.
right? He was playing on the emotions of the supporters at the time. There was always a precedent. So when things happen, it's not like there was something new. Whenever the supporters were angry and were protesting and were all that, then Usmanov banks in. I think there he was trying to put pressure on the Kroenkes to sort of let everything come to him. But ultimately, the Kroenkes stood firm. Why I say this is, don't go and piss off people who don't care. The Glazers don't care. If they were emotional, they would have left Manchester United a long time ago.
Mhm.
Don't come and stir them to make them upset or make them angry,
True.
but rather you can manage them and manage their affairs for them.
Okay.
And then over a period of time, you will be able to take over what you
Mm.
want to take over.
Mm.
So I think that is how come he
That's
calmed the situation
yeah,
down.
yeah. So we have just about 5 minutes. I want us to quickly touch on the issue of the low cash, how things have been run. I mean, tithing. Let me check my time. Yes, we have just about 5 minutes. Let's do it in 4 minutes. And he raised some issues. I'm not going to read the quotes. He raised some issues about the fact that if we are not careful with the way we were headed or where we were headed, by December or November, we wouldn't have had any money in the club, and things would have been very, 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 very bad. People are not understanding why there've been job cuts and all of that. He
Mhm.
gave very vivid explanations as to how much we bring in and how much we spent. It made no
Mhm.
sense. There was a
Yeah.
huge disproportion or distortion in bringing in, let's say, 100 million and spending about 200 million. It made absolutely no sense. And that's what he said. He even said that there was even a point where paying a body language consultant for £170,000. I mean, it looks like United was being run like a certain country I know. But Kwame, let me hear.
He made one political criticism of the Glazers, being that they are
They're giving
owners who
too
are
much rope.
3,000. He said they are owners. This is this. I'm paraphrasing as well. There are owners who are 3,000 miles away, living in Florida, who had given too much rope to two management teams over the past decades, who have completely failed the club. It's an indirect shot at the ownership, right, as to how they have run the football club down over time. We have been a club that has been making losses. If fans don't understand, ideally the Glazers are the ones who are supposed to put their money into it to rectify the situation, not necessarily Sir Jim Ratcliffe. They allow Sir Jim Ratcliffe to put in what he can put in, because they know that if he has to put in more, the Glazers will lose control of the football club. But as we've come to learn, the Glazers are never going to do it. So some way, somehow, someone has to come in to rectify the financial mess that has been going on at the club. He just said a very simple thing. Do we want to see a very good football team on a football pitch? I'm sure every fan wants to see that. So if we have to cut our staff from 1,100 to 700, which was the number in 2013 when we were a very, very successful team, and save as much as almost £100 million. Let me explain why it's almost £100 million. By letting 250 staff go last year, the club saved between 40 to 45 million pounds. We've let another 250 go this year. We are going to save another 40 to 45 million pounds. That's about 80 to 90 million pounds. By the power of marginal gains, if you add all the other little bits, including sacking somebody who is a body expert who is earning 170k for doing absolutely nothing, United just create loot and share. That's what had happened over the past decade. People are creating positions and just chilling. Lunches for people. How many companies offer lunches, free lunches to people?
That was what he was
we
asking
do?
Gary Neville.
Which cost the club £1 million every year. Free lunches. Why? For what? For doing what
He
exactly?
has to go down the bank and borrow money to do that. It makes no sense.
If you put all these little bits together, at least you'll be saving close to £10 million a year. That's £100 million saved that you would rather be paying to staff who barely do any work, productive work for Manchester United. What it means is we don't have to take the hardline stance of selling certain key players who may be key to our future to be able to go around these problems. But once we cut our costs, right, and be able to save as much as that, we'll be able to keep some of these players while selling other players who don't have a future at the football club, i.e. Garnacho and Meno, because these are the two players who caused a lot of stir. The club doesn't necessarily have to sell them in this case now, because now we are able to cut costs and save a lot of money, of money by cutting the staff. So all we want to see as fans now is be true to your word. Give this manager the right budgets. Give this manager the right players. Back him. And let him be able to coach a team that he's comfortable coaching on the football pitch. One that he's comfortable coaching. One that Wilcox is comfortable also managing. Because as we were told, Wilcox is supposed to develop the game model. And if he's satisfied with this game model that Ruben Amorim wants to implement, and Ruben Amorim insists, according to Barada, that he wants to play this style of football, then we have to provide the kind of materials needed for him to be able to implement it to the best form.
All right. There's a lot that was said, but we can't do everything. There are subsequent episodes that would be here to talk about some of these things, the key quotes that was given. But this is just our initial reaction to a very extensive conversation that Sir Jim Ratcliffe had with members of the press. My name is Kwame Bafo. I'm here with Kwame Nkrumah. I was here with him to do this with you. There was an emergency podcast. It was so you realize we didn't discuss Betis, but because we've come today, we have to come after the Betis game. So it's very, very important that you take note of this. We'll see you on the next one. Remember to subscribe to the channel and also like and share the videos. Have a great time. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.